All right, good morning, YouTube. Today I have the great honor of talking to the absolute greatest mogger of all time. He probably benches your total. I know he probably benches mine, but I am deeply honored and humbled to be talking with Freaky D, Dennis Arnold. Truly a class act, one of the best channels on YouTube. Don't let the algorithm fool you. Dennis, Freaky D, if you would like to introduce yourself.
And you're gonna make me blush, man. My name Dennis Freaky D. I mean, he pretty much covered it. I've been training now seriously for probably about a decade, and then on and off bro stuff probably another 5 to 6 years on top of that. I honestly made my YouTube with no intentions of ever creating a YouTube channel or anything like that, with no intentions of even uploading anything. And then after a few years, one day I uploaded a video. I'm wanting to say it was like a 405 by 3 bench press might have been my first upload or something like that. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
Awesome. Yeah. Cause I'm a huge believer in if it's humanly possible, then it's possible for myself. Cause I don't like any type of pessimism when it comes to my own goals. And even if there's just one person out there who did it, and you who've done it naturally and with such great time, tenure, and just patience, I always remind myself when I'm feeling not as strong in the gym, because I feel like that's a common issue with people my age working out now. I'm just it took this guy X amount of years, so it's just all right, be patient, keep working hard, don't let it get to you. Because when I do see your numbers, when I do see your fees, I'm just I'll get there soon. I'll get there soon. I'll get there soon. And when soon is relative, it's
right.
Years.
And I'm with that 100%. I think a lot of people mentally will handicap themselves, and you're shooting yourself in the foot right out of the gate. Mm-hmm. When I first, and this is before YouTube videos, well, I think YouTube existed. When I first benched 300 pounds, the very first time I hit it, and it was an ugly touch and go, bounce off my chest, ass coming off the bench. I said right after that, I want to bench 600 pounds. And the only, I had seen Tank Abbott bro bench 600 pounds on a old fucking MMA DVD somewhere. And he's kind of built like me, a little bit stockier and bald beard, and if he can do it, I can do it. I didn't even know 600 was this super elite ultra feat. I didn't know powerlifting was a thing. I just knew that we bench pressed a lot, and I wanted to bench press the biggest number out of all my friends. And so I, made 600 was my goal. At the point I'm at now, I'll probably never bench 600, and I'm okay with it. Getting to 550, how many people can say they've done that? So even with a quote unquote unrealistic goal, if you come up a little bit short of that, I mean, you're still light years ahead of somebody who, 405 is the natty limit. If I bench that, that's fine and dandy. When, there's people out here that are benching well over that. And it's that 4-minute mile theory. Everybody thought the 4-minute mile was impossible. One person does it, and then, multiple people start doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I have no reason to ever believe that I can't, I feel like that's one of the cool things about, when you have that optimism and that belief in yourself, is why should you not believe in yourself, I guess, is my thing. And that's something I always try to ask people too, is why do you think that? And then they'll give a wide variety of different reasons, none of which have really showed themselves quite yet, except in their own head. So
absolutely.
That's awesome.
I think that's too, if I can go off on a little bit of a tangent, within powerlifting itself, we've seen the numbers explode over the last decade, especially in raw powerlifting, both on the tested and the untested side. I know when I did my first meet in March of 2014, and back then, if you could total 1,800 pounds as a 275er, there was a good chance you could get an animal sponsorship, tested or untested. And I set my goals as such. There's a guy named Mike Hedleski. He was a 275 USAPL IPF guy, deadlifts 800 pounds, and he totaled a little over 1,800. And I just thought, holy crap, this dude's strong, natural. And I set my goals based off him. We're actually friends now. It's funny, but and those were my goals. And so now you think people getting into powerlifting now, well, my goals were 1800, 275. Now 1800, you have to total that as a 181 in the USAPL to make the podium at nationals as a 181. Back then it was super elite for a 275er. So kids coming up are seeing that now, and their goals are obviously, well, if the 181s are totaling 1800, should I want to total 1900 at 181? And so the perception of what's possible expands, and then the numbers follow.
Yeah, that's so cool. So something I wanted to ask you was, what was life like for you before the gym, before lifting?
So I guess we'll go all the way back to childhood. I played a lot of sports when I was young, from like 5 to 12. I played Little League baseball every year. Played basketball. I played volleyball. I played soccer. I was always pretty athletic. I was usually, if not the best on the team, I was always one of those group of 3 or 4 kids that I knew I was going to start. I knew I was going to play. Always wanted to do something physical. I wanted to lift weights when I was little, I grew up in the era of Arnold, the movie star, and, seeing him and Sylvester Stallone on screen and stuff. I wanted to get jacked, but my mom and my stepdad at the time were under the assumption that lifting weights would stunt your growth. That misconception. And so I didn't really get to lift until I got into high school, which is subsequently when I started becoming a degenerate, experimented with drugs, dropped the sports. I did take a weightlifting class 1 year in high school, and I did pretty well weightlifting, but then I didn't have really nowhere to lift after I had that class for a year. I did a lot of bad shit from probably, 15 years old to about 21, 22 years old. I got in trouble, legal issues involving marijuana, which is funny because that's not going to be a thing anymore soon, hopefully everywhere. But yeah, I always worked. I always kept a roof over my head. But I didn't have a whole lot of ambition. And then I think I was 22 1 year with my income taxes. I bought a weight bench and a weight set. And me and one of my roommates at the time, we would just bench 5 days a week. And that's kind of how I got back into it. But early on, before the training, like I said, I'd make enough money to pay my bills and, drink, smoke, party as much as I could.
That's really dope. Like, so there's a lot of things I wanted to ask about that, but the first one I'll ask is, like, since you did come up with like the Arnold, Sylvester Stallone era, like, did you find that as you got older, maybe you got like a bit more like wiser, that when you went like did you ever go back to those movies and realize that there's a lot more there that like applies to you as you like matured? Or
Absolutely. You realize that their physiques and their level of leanness, it's more than just lifting weights. Drugs are, let's not, skirt around the issue. They were on probably lots of them. But even if you put that to the side, to get really lean, you have to really focus on your diet, being disciplined and things like that. And then obviously their level of the drugs are involved. When I was little watching them, I thought, man, you just lift some weights, chop down some trees, flip a tire or two, and your muscles are just going to start popping. And yeah, as I got older and, lifting weights for years, and I even, joke with Jeffrey D. Verity Schofield, his arms are bigger than mine by measurement. He has bigger arms than me, and I overhead pressed his squat. So, yeah, it just, there's a lot more to it than just lifting heavy ass weights. And again, I don't ever limit yourself, like chase your dreams. But you will realize after you put in the 5 to 10 years of work, and if you are doing most everything right, I don't expect nobody to be 1,000% optimal with few exceptions. And then at that point, you know, you put in the work, put in the time, you'll have a realistic idea of what you may or may not be capable of, and can come at it from that approach. But early on, man, you know, shoot for the fucking stars.
Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, and like one thing I admire was you know, just benching every day. You had, like, that was what you had. That's and then as a result, that's what you did. And then like you didn't really care, like, is this optimal? Is it gonna, like, is my shoulders is gonna hurt? Like, it's just kind of like, hey man, you want to do this? All right, cool. And then you just kind of went through it.
Yeah, we had no idea. I didn't know what progressions were. I didn't know what periodization was. I had never read anything about lifting. I didn't even think, you know, obviously the internet was around and I'm sure we could have found some information, but it didn't even come to my mind to think to do that. You know, we would literally every Monday we would max out, and then we would just do reps to failure. Tuesday was our light day, and we would play the card game. I don't know if you're familiar, but you set a weight and then you take a deck of cards and you flip a card, and if it's 9, you do 9 reps. Next person goes, and we do that. Wednesday we would go heavy again. Thursday light again, and when we're going heavy and we're going to failure every day. Friday was the same thing, and then we would take Saturday and Sunday off, and then Monday we would max out again. So we were maxing out every Monday, going to failure every day, like no rhyme or reason, just working until we couldn't work no more. Smoking cigarettes, intra workout, weed before and after, eating Chinese food and stuff. Obviously, the food probably helped because we were eating tons of sodium and protein and carbs. And you know, we were 22 years old and drinking after we were done. So yeah, but again, we didn't know anything. We were ignorant, and there was nothing in our mind telling us that this is wrong or we should be doing it different or training splits or anything. We just went out there and got after it.
Yeah, that's super important because like oftentimes, like especially nowadays, like I get so many questions that was like, which is better, this or that, which is more optimal, this or that. And I mean, it's like at the end of the day, it all kind of comes down to which one will you commit yourself to. Like,
absolutely,
that's usually the one, like the one I like ask them, like, which one will you commit yourself to? And it's like, well, I like this one more. I like the idea of this one more. All right, commit to it. Stop thinking about anything else, and let's like don't get distracted. Right. Like that's what I try to focus on people. So one thing I also wanted to touch on was the fact that so you said you like, you know, you were 22 when you like got that bench set and like we're doing that with your friends,
right?
Like I think it's very like interesting how people my age and younger, they think that if you didn't start at like, the age keeps dropping too. If you don't start at like 18, 17, 16 and or younger, that you're just not going to be big, like for some reason. Like they think like, oh, it's a bit too late. Like I'm not going to get that big because I'm starting when I'm 23. And it's just, like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, have you like seen that kind of mindset in like people around you?
You know, coming from sports, you know, like my older brother wrestled, and a lot of you know, elite wrestlers in high school and college, you know, started when they were like 5, 6, or 7.
Yeah.
And there's so much skill involved in something like that. In terms of like powerlifting or bodybuilding, it's unfortunate that people think that, and especially now with all the, you know, the TikTok and everything.
Yeah.
Trust me, like when I go on there and I see a 17-year-old or 18-year-old pulling 700 plus pounds, it's like, holy shit. But the noob gains and the numbers tend to rise fast. But that 17-year-old that's pulling 700, 750 pounds now, look at him in 5 or 10 years. He's not going to be pulling 1,500 pounds. You know what I'm saying? So lifting is something where I think the training age matters more than the number age to an extent. You know, if you're starting when you're 60 years old, by all means, still start and still get after it, but you're not going to be able to, you know, hit that physical peak, you know, in a time relative to where you're going to put up these astronomical numbers. But, you know, you're starting at 20, at 25, at 30. If you're starting at 30, you still got 10 years till you're 40. And your body's fresh. Your training age is, I'm assuming, 0, depending upon what you did before then. But, you know, if you put in a hard decade of smart, consistent training, again, doing most things right, you're not going to get everything right. You know, where you end up after 10 years, as a 35 to 40-year-old, taking all things into account, you're going to be just as good, if not better, than, that 24-year-old that you saw on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. It's never too late to get started, and especially in something like, powerlifting, bodybuilding, strongman, the age at which you can peak and be in your quote unquote prime really has more to do with your training age than, your actual number age, within reason, of course.
Yeah, that's a great message. I really like that. So we kind of covered, so that was like life before the gym, and then like a little bit you touched on like what got you into training. So for you, and who are some other inspirations and like people who had a big effect on your training when you started to, like, let's say, quote unquote, know better? Like, who were your sources of information, inspiration, and where did you get like your knowledge coming up?
So, a lot of it was self-learned, just kind of going through it on my own. Again, the community wasn't quite what it is now. I think as far as inspiration-wise, in terms of strength athletes, is John Paul Sigmarsson was probably my first like inspiration. And that even goes back to when I was little, before I ever knew I was going to lift weights. He just looked like He-Man in real life. And, seeing him win World's Strongest Man and being super muscular and stuff. As far as when I started to learn, there's a book. It's I can't think of the name of it right now, the exact name, but it's Periodization by Tudor Bumpa. And Tudor Bumpa is the godfather of periodization. So that's one of those books that if you read it, you can apply so much to it elsewhere. But even before I got that book, I'd say like within the community and stuff, Chad Wesley Smith and Juggernaut was a big one. I took a lot from him. And when I came into it, I was one of those old school guys, like, if you can't lift X amount of weights or something like that, I really don't want to hear what you have to say, which it isn't the greatest philosophy to have. It applies to an extent because you want to see some sort of, progression or semblance of knowledge that somebody can apply. But, you don't have to be the world record squatter to give out squat advice. But Chad Wesley Smith stuck out to me because he was very strong against somebody who's kind of built like me, not extremely muscular looking, but very dense and strong. So a lot of the Juggernaut stuff, the Juggernaut podcast, I would go back and listen to and watch old YouTube videos of that. And, his Juggernaut free program that he had was very linear based. And it kind of, it stuck out to me because it's such an easy progression to follow. Yeah. I'm trying to think who else initially. Johnny Candido, of course. I think anybody who got into powerlifting around that time, Candido was probably one of the big ones. I think he was probably one of the first powerlifters that was actually putting out regular content. Yeah, and then even, like Physiques of Greatness, as funny as that sounds, and Scooby were two of the big ones early on, and Brandon Campbell. Taking what I could from a lot of those places. I'm sure there's some other ones that I didn't mention. And making sense of what I could out of each of them. A lot of people, unfortunately, pit styles against each other or personalities against each other. And if you remain open-minded, you can find something from a bodybuilding channel. You can find something from a CrossFit personality, a weightlifter, that even if that's not your discipline, you can probably find something from that discipline or from that individual that can apply to yours.
Yeah, 100%. Because like I grew up also with like Bruce Lee movies, like
right, yeah.
So like take what's useful, discard what isn't, and add uniquely what's yours. Like that whole philosophy. So like when I got into training, like I actually had at that point in time a lot of experience with like traditional martial arts and some MMA at that point. So I already was going into that kind of mindset. So like for example, one of the biggest inspirations for myself was like Brian Alsrew, Omar Isuf, and
Omar, yeah,
and then Alex from Alpha Destiny. Like so they all trained very differently, and I did pick up a lot of, but I was able to like glean from them all the things that I liked. Like it wasn't just things that I thought was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, that's optimal. It's like, no, I was like, that looks cool, I'm gonna do it. Like it's like
Right.
Brian Alsby was like, I was deadlifting, and then I went home, saw the video where he literally was like rowing like at my deadlift as a warm-up, and I was just like, oh god, I need to do better. And then I was like, all right, cool. And then like I saw Omar Isuf video, and he doesn't train calves, and I was like, cool, I can get that out of my program.
Right.
And then so like, yeah, and I feel like now it's just kind of like I think there's a little bit of confusion now, because like we cherry pick what each person believes to be, optimal. And it is to an extent in their context of like their training methods, their training philosophy. But then people, there's like, well, if it's optimal in this situation, and then you have this other guy who does something else that's optimal in their situation, and then they try to mix it, they try to like make sense of it, and then they try to put it into the program. They get this Frankenstein approach that just like, keeps them small, keeps them like wondering like, why ain't it working?
Right. Yeah. I'll tell you a funny one about Omar. And this goes back, gosh, it is probably 2014 or so. He had a Couch Hamilton on his channel, and he benched like 405 by 10. And I posted what we would then call a humble brag. Now, it's probably very frowned upon. But I posted in the comment section, I was like, oh man, I only did 405 by 8 on bench, and, put only, like it wasn't very good or anything. And Omar replied to that comment. And that was the first video ever of mine that back then there was a glitch on YouTube that if you got a bunch of views really fast, it would show 301 plus as the views, and it wouldn't count them. And that was the first and maybe the only time I ever got that 301 plus. That was because Omar replied to my comment, and then a bunch of people came over and saw the video.
Yeah, I think that's funny, because like that's from what I've heard from like how other people have found your channel, it's very similar to that, where it's just they see a comment, they see a claim, and then they're just like, no way. Then they got to check it out. It's like, and then they just see a library of examples of you just mogging people into oblivion.
Right. I don't do it as much anymore, and it's funny how cyclical things are. But back probably 2014-ish through 2015, 16, I tried a little harder than I do on YouTube now. Fortunately, I'm not reliant on the platform for money or anything like that. So, but I would just find videos with a lot of views. Like it would be a music video or something completely irrelevant, and I would just go post, I can bench 500 pounds or, something like that. Or I squat 775, and I would post that on these random videos with big views, just trying to lure people in. And then now seeing like natural hypertrophy and bald Omni-Man, kind of using that approach, but more refined, just being in absolutely every comment section. And of course, they were doing it in a much more intelligent manner, commenting on something that had to do with the video, and then videos within the community. And they were like on every single one, like almost as soon as it uploaded. So to kind of see, that was a strategy back then, just wasn't as well executed. And then to see it come back around as a strategy now and done correctly to help grow channels, it was pretty funny how, seeing it come full circle.
Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, let's get into your training methods a little bit then. So linear progression, linear periodization, like I think it's like, how important do you think it's necessary to like make that distinction? Like I think it's pretty important, but I wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the terms kind of get used as they're one and the same, and they're not. Nobody is going to be able to linearly progress forever. That's just not going to happen. But you can use linear periodization forever. You'll have to tweak some variables. You'll have to tweak some movements, things like that. And I think that's where it gets a bad rap, because people substitute those words together. And again, obviously, you can't linearly progress forever, but you can periodize it forever. You just can't. You're not going to do 5x5 on bench press for the rest of your life, and even resetting it when you hit, say you top out at 315 5x5. So you reset you do a deload and you reset to 275 5x5, and then this next time you get to 350, and then Next time you get to 365, the next time you get to 375, and you're going to start seeing smaller advancements. And, you know, at some point you're going to have to change, you know, you're not going to do the 5x5 forever. You got to change the sets and reps, or you're going to have to find a variation or something like that.
Mhm.
And I think that's where the misconception of, you know, I did linear periodization / progression and got to this, and then I hit a wall. It stopped working.
Mhm.
It didn't stop working. You just didn't make the proper adjustments within the parameters of linear periodization to ensure that it keeps working.
Mhm. All right, yeah. So like, because when I was started lifting, like I found like alpha testing pretty early into my training. So and like with all the other sources of information, out of all the other sources of information I got, there was only one that actually had a linear program, and that was Brian Allsrue. Everyone else
Right.
that I listened to at that point in time was pretty much like double progression everything, concurrent everything. Like even DUP was like starting to come up at that point in
Right.
time. So I was just like, okay, higher frequency approach, different volume thresholds and whatnot. But for me, what actually got me out of like the first wall that I hit was a 225 bench. Like I was stuck at that weight for I mean, I was young and I was impatient, so like even a month or 2 months was like too long for me.
Right.
So like, but what I did was like during that time I was trying to do like DUP, I was trying to do like concurrent volume day, intensity day, and I was still stuck. But what got me out of it was actually like a modified, like linear periodization progression approach, where I would still do 5x5, but rather than next week I add 5 pounds to every set, I just added it one at a time, and then I would do 4 sets of 5 at the same weight as last week, then 1 set of 5 at a new weight. Next week I do 2 sets of 5 at that new weight, with then 3 sets of 5 at the other one, and then I just slowly
That's actually
progress that
really
way.
smart. I like that. That's not a way I've ever thought to do it, but that's actually really good.
Yeah, like that was the first. That was what actually got me out of 225, and I was like so happy. Like I was like repping it out finally. I was like that was like the first like moment of like just true pride, because that was when I actually like just went through a plateau. So, but what got me out of it was linear, and I feel like one thing that kind of like messes up some lifters, especially like some that I like kind of talk to now who do follow other YouTube channels, is because it's not really. I don't think it's talked about nearly as much. Is that it's just like, well, isn't that only for beginners? Like, what is your usual response to like that kind of thought process?
Yeah, and you know, starting strength. That's why it's thought of for beginners. And starting strength, the way they do it and continue to do it, I'm not really the biggest fan of. And that's what people kind of default to when you say 5x5. They tend to default to starting strength. And I'm somebody who loves the 5x5 set and rep scheme. And you know, people unfortunately will default to that when they hear linear too. Like there's other ways to do linear. It's not just 5x5. But again, it goes back to that. People will hit that first wall, that first plateau, and they stop. A lot of people stop after that, and it seems to be preached that that's what you do, that your linear progress has ended at that point. So you need to move on to something different. And I don't know why that's such a big conception. I don't know where it originated or where it came from. But I think that's the main reason, is because it's been preached so much that anybody getting into it now just seems like, okay, my linear progression's over. I got to go to something different, instead of adjusting, again, like I said, within the parameters of a linear periodization type thing. So yeah, it's just a big giant misconception that has perpetuated over the years. And hopefully we can dispel a little bit of that, at least among whoever sees this.
Yeah, definitely. Because like one thing I will say about like Rip and like starting strength, I feel like he's kind of like the Sigmund Freud of like strength training. Because the thing is with Sigmund Freud, it's kind of like everyone criticizes everything that fell out of favor, like everything that we disproven. But that's also because like so much of what they've like talked about is just generally accepted and now part of our like modern perception of things. Now, as things go on, he does get crazier and crazier, so it starts to fit a bit more.
For sure.
But like when it comes to that, the 5x5, like yeah, it's one of my favorite ones also. And like I think one thing that if it were to come back, or if I were to make an effort to help it come back, I would start referencing Reg Park, Bill Starr, that kind of like that
Absolutely.
kind of 5x5.
Yeah.
Because then it's just like
sure.
like they got jacked doing it too. Like but they were also incredibly strong, like silver era guys, like health, strength, aesthetics. Like they got all three, and
Right.
so it was really impressive to do that. But with the 5x5 and like those modifications you mentioned with linear periodization. So this is me like kind of asking and telling you my perspective of like your training and how I understand it. So 5x5 is still being used. The main like something that you do is that the last set is an AMRAP. So the most important thing is starting at a lightweight. And so let's say about 60-ish%, like around there.
Yep.
Like, do you ever go lighter than like 60, or is 60?
I do. Generally, if I'm giving advice to somebody else, or telling them how to optimally set something up, 60% is a good starting point. Myself personally, depending upon if I'm gonna have a meet, when the meet is kind of the biggest thing. I may or may not ever compete again at this point. Breaking news, but that always dictated my training, is when my next meet was, as to what percentage I would start at, even what rep scheme. But for the sake of this, like if I were coaching somebody, or if I were telling somebody how I would do it, 60%, 5x5, really 4x5 plus an AMRAP, and then that AMRAP, I would always say, to it, if it's somebody who I trust in RPE 9, if it's like an 18-year-old that I was coaching at the time, I would tell him RPE 7, because I knew he was going to push past whatever I told him, because he is an 18-year-old.
That's smart. Yeah.
But yeah, I never wanted that AMRAP to go to absolute failure. Like, even as I was coached, I picked up that AMRAP thing from somebody who coached me. And I was already, well into lifting at the time, and he would tell me to technical failure. And I knew when my technique broke down. So it was AMRAP to technical failure for me. Coaching it to other people, which communication is huge, and learning how to communicate with each individual lifters. But I would generally use an RPE and just say, hey, RPE 8, leave 2 in the tank, leave 1 in the tank, or, whatever on the AMRAP. But I never wanted it to be a true failure.
Okay. Does that RPE ever change like throughout the weeks, like, or was it always like until like you need to reset, the RPE on that AMRAP is always like constant?
I always wanted it to be with 1 left in the tank. If I was coaching somebody, I always wanted 1 left in the tank.
Oh, okay. And then
I would just tell them different things based on my communication with that lifter, their personality. Like I said, the 18-year-old kid, he would bust his ass, but he had an 18-year-old kid's ego. So I would tell him RPE 7, because I knew he would go to an RPE 9. And if I told him 9, he was going to flat out, go till absolute failure. And I didn't want him to go to absolute failure. So I told him 7. But yeah, I always wanted 1 left in the tank.
Okay. Yeah, and that's good, because like I definitely know, like myself, like if that was told to me, it's just like I would like do that AMRAP, and then next week I'd be so shot that like my progression would like suffer as a result. So that's
right.
That's important. And then another thing, like, so then when you do reset, like there's kind of like 2 rows I kind of go into, like when I use linear, it's like that reset that you mentioned. And then do you go to 60% of your new performance, or do you just go slightly above where you last started? Like what's your reset approach?
One quick thing before we get on to that is with the AMRAPs, the biggest thing for the AMRAPs, the reason why I would add them into coaching after my coach had me do it, is linear is boring. It's extremely boring. It gives, it's not capping the lifter. It's capping the lifter at, 1 left in the tank. But, if they can do 10 reps, if they can do 20 reps, if they can do 25, it gives them, something to hit. And then you can kind of gauge progression as you're going, because if they did 250 4x5 and got 13 on their AMRAP this week, next week they do 260 4x5 and got 14 on their AMRAP, they're getting stronger, and they can see it in real time. And that's extremely mentally motivating.
100%. Yeah. That's the one thing I kind of liked about having a more linear approach, is that you can expect the PRs to kind of happen. Like the problem with like something like a double progression kind of scheme is like, yes, you progress when you're ready, but at the same time, like there's a lot of things that can happen in between that can mess up you being ready. Whereas like when you go into the gym, you know what you're going to be aiming to hit. So you kind of have that like that ability to kind of mentally prime yourself to kind of go from there. But I feel like with double progression, I'm not saying this is inherent to it, or like just causally from it. But I personally, and maybe some other people can relate to this, like when I kind of felt like, progression will occur when I'm ready. If I don't feel ready going to the gym, I'm not going to beat myself up for it, and then I'm going to like train with that kind of mindset, which could have an effect on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then with the going back to the reset then, so is it slightly above where you last started, or 60% of like your new like training numbers, or like expected
For me,
WRAP max?
I would just go by feel. So I would go, if I was resetting a 5x5 like that, I would, just if I started at 315 last time, this time maybe I start, depending upon where I ended at too, maybe this time I'll start at 330 or 335. Again, a lot of it just based on feel versus, taking a hard percent. And then, of course, again, depending what phase of training I'm in, you don't necessarily have to reset the 5x5. You can, if I'm walling at 5x5, maybe now I go to a 5x3 or a 3x5 or a 3x3. And continue progressing further, especially, leading into a meet when you're going to build up to a 1 rep max. You're not just going to keep resetting 5x5s and then go compete. So, there's the reset is the first and easiest way to, break through whatever plateau you had. But again, even after so long, you can't keep resetting forever and getting back to, a higher number at the same rate. You're going to have to alter volumes, whether that be to start at a higher volume. So last time you were doing 5x5, maybe this time you're going to start progressing on 5x7s, or, increasing intensity and lowering volume to peak to a higher 1 rep max. So you take your 5x5 and maybe you do like 2 weeks of a 3x5 and then down to a 3x3 and progress it as such to get your new 1 rep max. And then you could go reset to a 5x5 after that. And you could certainly do it a percentage wise of your new rep max. But it's just so easy, and you have so much data compiled at that point. I always found it easier just to, I started at this number last time. I ended at this number. So let's start a little bit higher than where we started last time. And theoretically, we're going to finish a little bit higher than where we finished last time.
Okay. Yeah, that was actually my next question, because like changing the reps and sets, because like what helped me a while ago now, like almost a year and a half ago, maybe a year now, when I did like start implementing more linearity into my training, where it wasn't just ranges, which I think are incredibly useful, especially for hypertrophy. But when it came to my strength work, trying to apply it there was just like kind of up and down. Like I noticed that the fluctuations in my strength like actually were less frequent when I implemented a linear approach. The only thing that was kind of being tested more so when I added linearity to my strength training was my patience and honestly like my mental fortitude, because like it's gonna get heavy at some point, and then like you have to not only be willing to handle such heavy loads, you have to be willing to drop things down also to keep progressing, which is something that I feel like when it comes to a lot of that double progression concurrent style of training is like, I'll just keep backing up hoping to go through. But sometimes you just need to actually like jump in on that other side and actually put work in there too. So that's very interesting. So like for example, like I've been using like for my strength work like FAS lifts, like linear, like 3 sets of 8, then you keep progressing, adding 5 pounds each week. When you can no longer hit 3 sets of 8, you go to 2 sets of 8, and then you keep adding 5 pounds. When you can no longer do that, like, so when I did that, I was like, damn, like this is such a, in my opinion, it was like a much more effective way of like doing things. And it was linear. It was linearly progressed, linear periodization. It was just like modifying it. Yeah. So I was making great gains. And I feel like a lot of my clients that I have now who have strength goals, when I put them on that, they're just like, oh my God, this is actually working.
Yeah, it's crazy because again, linear gets boxed into 5x5, and it's so much more than that. And even taking it one step further, now that we've talked about the resets and the progressing to different reps and sets and variations. So
that was the next thing I wanted to like kind of touch on.
Yeah, that's the logical progression. So you've exhausted all your 5x5 resets. You've exhausted peaking. You've exhausted higher volume stuff, and well, now, you're going to, and realistically, you should be doing at least one other compound movement in conjunction with whatever your main movement is. So Larson press. Well, for me, Larson press to bench press. You can obviously progress that the same in using all of these linear schemes, and using the variations, and you have to find kind of what your weaknesses are, where you fail on the lift, what's causing your failure, assuming that you're doing everything correctly from a technique standpoint and you're well fed and well rested and everything, and you figure out, and it's going to take some trial and error, but you'll figure out like what assistance lifts translate to your big three if you're a power lifter. Ed Cohen was the master of this. He found out what complementary movements would translate to his bench or squat or deadlift, and that's what he would do in the off season. He would come off peaking for a meet, and he had all his old data, and he knew that if I add 10 pounds onto my behind the neck press, then I'm going to add 10 pounds to my bench press come bench press time. And he would just try to bald omni man unga boonga beat the books. Last time I started my behind the neck presses at this number. This time I'm going to start it 5 or 10 pounds higher and in 5 or 10 pounds higher, and then I know once I take that and translate it back to my bench that it's going to end 5 or 10 pounds higher.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then like another thing that I like was I was like combing through your videos and like listening to them in the background while I did like some stupid shit. But so another thing that I saw was like when you reset, right? I like this idea of like you keep the same movement when you reset at least once.
Yeah,
but then
for sure.
The next time you reset, you actually switch to a different variation.
Yeah.
So I really like that idea. Like what are some like exercise variation, like I guess like maybe like a rotation that you kind of have, like or some that you recommend or like good starting points?
So for bench, if I'm talking to a beginner intermediate close grip bench, it's almost universally going to translate to your bench, to everybody's bench. You almost always could use more tricep power. So if I'm talking to the masses, that's what I'm going to say to try first as your first bench variation is close grip bench. Me personally, I like Larson presses, and not even necessarily for the added bench gains, but for lower back fatigue. The stronger you get, fatigue management becomes paramount. That's one of the big things for me. It basically takes out my lower body, but I still set up with my arch and my upper body. My stroke is still exactly the same with a little bit of added range of motion. I've seen Alex from Alpha Destiny now doing the ones where he doesn't retract his shoulders and does it more bro style. So you could add more range of motion that way, but I don't like to mess with my bench stroke too much. And even going off on Larson's, you can close grip Larson, wide grip Larson. You can modify those too, but definitely close grip bench press for bench. For squats, pause squats, again, universally going to have carryover to the masses. I would definitely try that one first out of anything. And then for deadlifts, I'm torn here, because this depends so much on your personal anatomy, how you're built, your leverages, whether you sumo or conventional, things like that. For me personally, my biggest deadlifts came on the heels of my biggest front squat. That ended up translating the best for me. My front squat doesn't do shit for my back squat, but it absolutely blows up my deadlift. But again, depending on if you're a longer, lankier person, probably deficit deadlifts. If you're a shorter, stockier person, front squats, maybe some RDLs, even block pulls. I've had great success with block pulls just to get in significant volume without putting too much force on my spine. But again, like with most things, the variations are going to be highly individual. But if I was just generally speaking for squat, pause squats, for bench, close grip bench, and I don't want to put out a general for deadlifts because those are just so unique.
Right.
But RDLs, you probably make a case for, even if you're a sumo puller, even if you're a tall, short, whatever, RDLs are probably going to hit the spot for everybody.
Right, because like the range of motion on it is like dependent on them and
Right,
kind of
right.
stuff like that. Awesome. So then next question I have is like kind of going over like the split and like how you kind of implemented into yours. Like, is yours split from like how I perceive it? Is it more like a movement split where it's like a bench day, a squat day, overhead press day, and a deadlift day?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when I was, heavy into powerlifting, it would be, I would squat day Monday, bench day Tuesday, deadlift day Wednesday. Thursday would be like some upper back bro work. And then Friday would be whatever weak points I had, be really attacking those. Maybe for 4 weeks, it would be something to do with squat. Maybe for 4 weeks, it would be something to do with deadlift. And then Saturdays and Sunday, I would take off. And this was when I was heavy balls deep into powerlifting. Now my split isn't as rigid because life has thrown me many a curveball, and it's just not priority for me now. So I've had to be more flexible. But yeah, being rigid and linear periodization, it only makes sense that if you're a powerlifter to go in the order of squat, bench, deadlift, because that's how you're going to compete. And then you could put a rest day in between, whatever your schedule worked with. I had weekends off. I was working Monday through Friday, would train with the crew after work. So it made sense for me to go 5 days. And then, like my bro upper back day was very light. So it was borderline a rest day anyway. And then my day that I attacked weak points wasn't extremely heavy either. So it would basically be 3 hard days in a row, 2 moderate to easy days, and then 2 rest days.
Okay. So one thing, like as something that I've noticed from like a lot of linear programs is that while they don't have a lot of accessory work, their accessory work is still highly specific. It still has a expected amount of progression parameters, and because like they are pushing so hard on that accessory work that even if there's not so much of it, it's still very potent in giving them gains. Like, so for example, like on a deadlift day, like let's say for yourself, and I've done this before in the past where, I heard front squats were going to blow up my deadlift. So I gave it a try. So I would have my deadlift and then I would do front squats. And then I would basically just finish the day with abs and back and then go home. But I found that when I was doing those kinds of workouts, like because I wasn't like filling my day with so many exercises, that I was able to apply intent behind each movement, and then like commit myself to the progression for each one and still make great gains. Like I feel like now, like something that I've struggled with and I still kind of struggle with because I do have some aesthetic goals. It's kind of like, well, I'm leaving so many stones unturned, aren't I? But then at the same time, I think the reason why linear especially works so well for strength is because you go in, you hit your body hard, and you start the recovery process as soon as possible. You're using movements that are great for like raw stimulus magnitude, as people like to call it nowadays. And you're hitting them hard, but then because you're not just shoving as much into like whatever amount of time you have to train, when you go home and you start the recovery process, you have like that amount of time where you're not burning yourself out is going to reward you the next session and in the coming weeks. Like that's kind of like my theory on it. Is that kind of like the idea of why there's not as much in those programs, like for isolations and whatnot?
It makes sense. I've never really thought of it like that. That's how I've set up my training for years now. It's my main movement, my secondary compound movement, and then accessories. And you may or may not be a lot of accessories because those first 2 movements I kind of really went after it.
Exactly.
Which right now my Saturdays and Sundays are my CrossFit days. So I do my 2 compounds. Then I do my conditioning, which I'm doing a lot of strongman stuff right now. And then if it's in me to do accessories after that, I will. And if not, I'll just, hit 20 minutes on the elliptical and go home. But no, then, now that you say that it does make a lot of sense. And I would much rather a strength athlete, see them, hit 2 to 4 movements really hard versus hitting 1 movement really hard and just kind of going through the motions over, 9 to 10 accessory movements.
Yeah, exactly.
Bodybuilding may certainly be a little bit different, and I'm not an expert there, so I'm not going to say, but for a strength athlete, absolutely, go balls deep on those 2 to 4 to 5 movements. If you have some aesthetic goals and there's time left over you have to kill, go in the mirror and do your dumbbell curls by all means, but really give yourself to those main movements that's going to progress your strength.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. That's why, like, whenever I coach people, I always ask them, like, which one is the priority? Like,
Right.
like I'm very much like a, size and strength channel. I still have like a soft spot for power building and the whole idea there. So, but the thing is, like, I have come to a point where it's just like, okay, it's not so much that it's a mix. It's just you like knowing like which one's the priority, which one are you first and foremost, and then how much can you reasonably fit in that's not going to hurt the other thing. So
Right.
like, which is a much more responsible way of just like, I'm gonna get the best of both, I'm gonna mix the two, like so that's really good to
And
know.
I think honestly, especially for the naturals, if you just push your strength on your compound movements really hard, I'm not saying don't do any accessories, but if you really focus on pushing your strength on those compound movements and your diet is on point, you're gonna look good. I mean, you may not be, Z's, bruh, but you're gonna look amazing if your diet's good and you're training hard.
True. And like, even like from my perspective of like bodybuilding and stuff like that, while it might not be the squat, bench, and deadlift, you still have a compound lift that you want to get as strong as humanly possible. It might be an overhead press, a dumbbell press, a chin up, Romanian deadlift,
Right.
front squats, safety bar squats. Like, you still have some compound that you put into your program to hit as hard as possible, and to like that you want to see scale over time, because that's just what works for like it's just so time tested. Like, there's
Absolutely.
and like no amount of iliac pull downs optimally like doing the like that kind of stuff is this, it's just not enough. Like, the way I kind of look at that kind of stuff is, I like martial arts analogies. It's like a 1-2, like everything you do like with the one is to set up that heavy hand, but if you never like throw that heavy hand, like you might win on points, but that's like, there's no moral victories when it comes to your strength and physique. So it's like,
Right.
you either get there or you don't. Like, you have to
Right.
hit it hard sometimes. So like, there's no way you can do that without it. So something else I wanted to ask you then was like this mindset that you could somehow graduate from linear progression, because like we just covered how, it's more than a 5x5. You can do things how other people have implemented it. So you can go to a 5x7. You could do 3x8s, then 3 sets of 5 and 3 sets of 3s. Like, you can peak, you can reset, you can do exercise variations, which, should be a sigh of relief for all the conjugate guys out there, that exercise variation is just not going away. But
Right.
the idea that you can somehow graduate from all of that, and how it's just old school, or it's just not effective in the modern era somehow, as if we're like completely different creatures and animals than who we were 50 years, 100 years ago. Like, what are your like thoughts on it?
I think it's just that misconception, and hopefully we've cleared up a lot of it talking about it. But when your 5x5 progression ends for the first time, your linear progression is not over. You just need to learn how to adjust it. If you're bored of linear periodization and you don't want to do it no more, by all means, explore other options. If you're not going to stick to linear periodization, like we said very early on in the conversation, do what you're going to be consistent with. And really attack, because at the end of the day, man, conjugate, linear, DUP, insert programming here, that's the 10%. 90% of it is putting in consistent effort under the bar over time, eating well, resting well, and just putting in the work. That's all this. That's the cake batter. The being super optimal is the icing on the cake. It's the 10%. Maybe if you did everything super optimally, you would bench 600 pounds instead of 550 pounds. But benching 550 pounds is still pretty fucking good. And you got there by being consistent, over a decade. And that's whether you did it conjugate, whether you did it linearly, etc. You're probably going to get there as long as you put in the work. Again, that 10% extra doing everything super optimally, which is going to be the outlier, you know, may or may not have helped you, and maybe you were the one who did it optimally, and that's where you got. But again, and that's where all the YouTube arguments come from. That's where all the YouTube beefs stem from. It's the 10%. We all agree on 90% that, you know, putting in the work and getting there, and then we nitpick the little 10%.
Right, like which piece of equipment we use, what grip we use. Like,
absolutely, yeah.
Because like one thing I always tell people is like, when I'm making, because I do make custom programs for people and whatnot. Like when I'm communicating with them, something I tell them is, the program is just a vehicle for you to be consistent. Like that's it. Like the program isn't what's going to give you gains. The program's not necessarily what's giving you results. It's whether or not the program is made to be, like, it's made to optimize your consistency more than anything, because that's what gives you results. So
absolutely,
like this kind of idea that there's a magic program out there, or that someone who, you know, like is, for one, I also like don't like to let my clients know that I don't ever let them know like I'm smarter than you. I don't believe that. I just tell them like I'm just able to not be emotionally involved. Where it's like, I can give you a program where it's just like, here's what I know works. Here's what I can have a reason for each thing in the program. And here's why I think it would be good for you. And then I can do that in a way where I'm just like not distracted by other outliers, which is why, like, you know, when I work with a coach, like they give me that objectivity, that objective feedback and stuff like that, which is important, and people need that. Cause like, you know, like, I don't know if you have yourself, but I think you've seen it where people like they learn something new and they want to implement it into the program right away. Like they want to, like, you know, dig out the foundations, put in this new idea, and
it's unfortunate.
Yeah. So having someone there to kind of help you stop from doing that, I think is incredibly useful.
I agree 1,000%. And that's, you know, when I hired the coach I did, shout out Dustin Reed, my deadlift had stalled for like 2 years, right around 630. I just couldn't get past, you know, 630. So I hired him. He introduced me to compensatory acceleration training, a CAT, you know, a lot of people refer to it as, that he actually trained with Sam Bird, who, you know, got it from Dr. Squat, Fred Hatfield. So, you know, learning that, of course, you know, I wanted to implement it everywhere too. And I only had him coaching me for deadlifts. He wasn't doing my other lifts. I was competing in a push-pull. Bench is my baby. I said, hey, you know, I'm going to take care of my bench. You know, you program my deadlift. And I told him, I said, I'm not really worried about squat right now. So, you know, however you want me to squat, I'll do that too. And we went an entire off season, probably like 6 months. I never touched more than 4 plates from the floor. I never touched more than 5 plates from blocks. And my prior meet, I deadlifted 630 at 288. And then the meet after hiring him, which this was over a year later between meets, I ended up deadlifting that 300 kilo number, 661, at 270. And again, we went that whole off season. I never touched more than 4 plates off the floor. So yeah, and I thought that this was some golden ticket. I was like, oh shit, I got to do this everywhere and everything. And he helps, you know, keeping me from like, dude, it worked great for your deadlift, and it works really good on deadlifts. May or may not have the same effect on your bench, and it really didn't have the same effect on my bench.
Okay, yeah, because I definitely remember, like, for my own training, something that happened for me. Like, I have a lot of like mental blocks where things, just because like injuries like kind of accumulated.
Yeah.
So like that was something that I kind of had to work through and whatnot. But one thing that kind of helped me was, or what surprised me, I wish I should say, is I wasn't really lifting anything really higher than like low 4s, like for deadlift, and that's like very rarely. But everything was just done on stiff leg deadlifts for like sets of 8s and 5s. And then like during my deloads, I actually don't really deload from intensity. I only deload from like volume, because like for me, like it's the volume that like is like hard for me to recover from. Intensity is just like you do one set of 1 rep. Like, I mean, sure, it's really heavy, but at the same time, it's, you know, it's done in a minute. So like like hitting something hard and then like being done in a minute, I'm sure we all relate. So like I was surprised that I was able to hit, like, I hit 515 on a deadlift, like the smoothest, easiest rep I've ever done in my life. Like, it just felt so perfect after hitting nothing but like mid 3s to literally 405. That was it.
Right.
Like just taking that time to build up in like different thresholds and taking my time with my progressions and doing things like that like that was like so useful, because I did prior to like committing myself to linear for a bit, and a more linear, like at that point in time, I was doing nothing but conjugate. So I actually spent the money on all the different kinds of bands, all all the chains, and like as many other things. I canceled my gym membership, went to a powerlifting gym that like didn't clean bathrooms and like had people's name on walls, so it was pretty legit. So
Well, that's like my gym. Yeah, absolutely.
so setting up the bands and everything like that, and like I definitely remember that because I was consistent with it, I felt great. But at the same time, also was realizing that even though I'm maxing out on something different every single week, and that by itself does help with some amount of fatigue, you're still maxing every single week.
Yep.
So it's still incredibly hard, especially the stronger you get. Like at a certain point, like my numbers were like starting to climb up a bit, and then it was like I just found myself like being burnt out going into those max effort days. So with linear, I do like that I'm like building up beforehand.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of people think I don't like conjugate. It's not that I don't like conjugate. I think it's fine. I don't like it for powerlifting, for raw powerlifting specifically. I think it is not specific enough. And that's before even getting into the 2 max efforts a week. If you're actually doing max effort, yeah, that it's going to beat you down, in my opinion, even if it is slightly different movements or whatever. Whatever amount of bands, chains, it's still, if you're doing 2 max efforts a week, like holy shit. I think, and again, the West Side guys got glorified, and rightly so. They were very instrumental and pioneers. But man, like that environment, in my opinion, did so much more than the programming. Like if you're just around a bunch of fucking killers, you're gonna be a killer or you're gonna die. You ain't got no choice. And I say die metaphorically, of course. I don't mean literally. But and you're gonna become, that's just nature. You're gonna become that. And I think that had a lot more to do with it. I've yet to see very many, if any, like raw, drug-free, elite, natural powerlifters using conjugate, and I think it's for pretty good reason, because it's not probably the best thing for powerlifting.
And like you said, and I agree 100%. And like also the raw factor, like there's a lot of things that happen, like raw, natural, and like and whatnot that will affect that too, because like recovery is like one of the most important things for strength, and which is why like when you are like the one thing I've been like telling people nowadays is like how do you get the most out of your hard sessions? How do you get the most out of your hard training? Because when you're lifting the heaviest amount of weights that are going to challenge you the most, with the movements that are going to be the most specific to you, you can't do that all the time. But at the same time, everything you do beforehand should set it up in such a way that when you finally get to that session, that you're actually putting your best foot forward, because that's where you get your best results. Like that's kind of like my thought process on it. And when it comes to linear, it's very much, in my opinion, a test of patience and persistence.
It is, yeah.
Because like there's at least, I would say, a minimum of 9 weeks or so of like building up that work before you can finally get to something a little bit more exciting, which is why the AMRAP sets are important and whatnot. But there's that length of time, like it's very rare to find, like for example, when you said like you had a 2-year plateau, like most people would quit like somewhere along that line, like
fortunately my other lifts were still progressing and kept my head in the game, but yeah, my deadlift didn't move.
Because like I've talked to some guys who like they stopped training because they're just like, well, I mean, I'm not making progress anymore, so I just decided it wasn't worth it. And I was just like, that kind of broke my heart a little bit. But then I'm working with them now, so we're working to break past it, because they're working with me now, and that's the goal. But it's a test of patience and persistence. And I do think that it's really great for strength. But now I do want to kind of touch on like its application for hypertrophy. I think it's still good. And I think it's still great because you're focusing on progression, you're focusing on hard-hitting movements, and if you're doing it right, you're not just using it on one exercise, in my opinion.
Right.
Like you said, you have at least one, and that can make a big difference. So I think, and then if you look at like all the silver era guys, a lot of their stuff was that. Now, granted, there was a couple things that I need to kind of like read on, but some of them, like, they were doing like 10 sets of a movement, but it was the only other movement that they kind of did.
Right.
But yeah, they just linearly progressed everything, kind of auto-regulated it, like, resetting, going, then building back up and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's not, and we can pick straws of what's optimal and whatnot, but to say it doesn't work, I think that's entirely disingenuous.
Yeah, and we know now that hypertrophy is driven by how close you're getting to failure.
Yes.
That's the main driver of hypertrophy. So if you're not doing it for ultimate strength gains, hypertrophy is your main goal. You're still going to progress strength wise in those rep schemes, but instead of starting at 60% with your 5x5, start at 70%, and you're going to be closer to failure, and you're going to take these sets closer to failure, and get stronger at sets closer to failure. And if you're going to failure on your 5x5 at 300 pounds, this year, if next year you're going to failure at 5x5 at 365 pounds, you've gotten stronger. I'm 99% sure your muscles are going to be bigger, assuming diet and everything else is there too. And again, you can apply this to 3x12s or 3x10s or 5x10s or whatever set and rep scheme you want to. You can linearly progress, and as you get stronger and keep approaching failure, of course, hypertrophy is going to happen. So yeah, I don't know why people think you can't train it with hypertrophy. Again, like you said, you could pick straws at what's optimal, but to say it doesn't work is false.
Right. Because like people are always asking like, what's right and what's wrong, or like what's the best for hypertrophy, what's the best for this? Is like,
right.
Man, what's the best for you, bro? Like
Absolutely.
are you like, that's why my go-to question is, are you going to be consistent with it? Because I don't care. Like if I have some clients who love conjugate, who like absolutely love conjugate because they need that freshness in their program, and that's
right.
cool. I program around it to be a bit more friendly to recovery and whatnot, but like because that's what they like and that's what's going to keep them consistent and that's what's going to keep that thread of progression, that's what I'll do for them. But then I have other clients who's just like, all right, I just want it to be simple, clean, in, out, let's go home. And I was like, all right, cool, linear it is.
Right.
So yeah, that's awesome. And then what is your perspective on why it kind of fell out of favor? Like part of it, in my opinion, is because of that whole patience and persistence factor.
I think it's twofold. I think that's probably a lot of it, because it people get bored easily and want to move on to something else, which is probably why powerlifting isn't very popular in comparison to other sports in this country. And I think social media probably had a little bit to do with it. I know years ago, conjugate was extremely popular on YouTube, and a lot of it was because when you put PR in the title of your YouTube video, it got more views. Well, with conjugate, every other video is a PR. So this PR, that PR, this PR, that PR, and there was a lot of conjugate lifters. You don't see a lot of them anymore, and kudos to the ones who stuck with it, and big time props to the people who were willing to modify conjugate to suit themselves. Those people I have the utmost respect for. But yeah, between the boredom and then it falling out of favor on social media, I think, and then you saw that next wave of people who came up watching people with DUP and conjugate and these other methods, and Bulgarian light, when that was a thing for like 6 months. So the next wave, we're going to do all of that, and leaving linear behind. But like most things in life, it's cyclical. We'll probably see a resurgence in linear periodization at some point, and then it'll go out of favor again. And that's just how things go with what's trendy at the moment. Right.
So all right, so that kind of covers all my questions about like linear training methods and whatnot. I guess the other thing is like, so CrossFat. I love how you call it that. Like that's like that's incredibly funny. Like for your stuff, is it mainly like strongman implements for that?
This go round, yes. I've CrossFat for me is just compound lifts plus conditioning. And I just I think I posted it for the first time in like 2018, maybe. I even set up my boxes and, proclaimed myself the 2018 World CrossFit Championship. And so it's been a running joke for quite some time now. But I've always, even in my off seasons of powerlifting, like that first month after a meet, I enjoy doing things like box jumps, and I've always done cardio, even though that allegedly kills your gains. So I kind of just adopted, anything for powerlifters that's not powerlifting is CrossFit. Where I was typically a heavier lifter, CrossFit, just worked. So, currently it's 2 compounds and then conditioning. And my main conditioning work right now is strongman stuff. So I've been doing a lot of farmers carries, yoke walks. I've been doing yoke presses, overhead presses as a compound movement. And it's just fun. When I was balls deep in powerlifting, it would break the monotony of, my linear progressions for months on end. Box jumps are fun to me. I like jumping. So I've always done that too. And it is kind of a fun tongue-in-cheek word that summed up it gave a name to the training I was doing that wasn't really conventional.
Right. Yeah. Because like I actually didn't have access to like barbells until I was like 19, 20. So like before that, I was doing like almost exclusively like calisthenics and like those kinds of workouts. So I was doing like a lot of jumping, a lot of jump rope and stuff like that. And I was like almost 300 pounds. So like every single time I jumped, like my titties would come up and then like slap down. Play my belly like a drum. So it's like, that's what it was like back then. So I definitely do have like a soft spot for that kind of training. Because right now, like on my weekends, that's when I tend to do like boxing, Muay Thai, a little bit of wrestling. Like I like that kind of stuff. Like for one, I do. There's some things that I do in my life where like it's kind of necessary to have, like not necessarily necessary in the sense that like I need to do it, like I'm getting in fights in every weekend. It's just more so like I've made some choices in my life where if I don't also learn how to fight, I'm kind of being a dumbass. Like I'll just say it, like I carry. So if one thing I always tell people is like if you decide to carry anything, a screwdriver, a flashlight, and of course like the more scary stuff, like if you don't know how to like fight, if you don't know how to wrestle, you brought the other person a weapon. Because
that makes a lot of sense.
So I'm like every weekend, and I just find it fun. Like we mentioned Rocky and like stuff like that. Like I literally I tell people this because like some people actually don't believe me because they just don't think that I would actually waste that much time, but I don't consider it a waste of time. I would watch at least one Rocky movie before a workout. So I would watch the whole 2 hours and then have a 1 to 2 hour workout. So 4 hours of my day was just Rocky and then working out.
Right.
Because like I was in high school, like what else is a high schooler doing? Like so I was doing that. Sometimes I would watch maybe a couple more. It's like, damn, like I just got through Rocky 1. I have to see the second one for the 50th time.
That's cool. I said I didn't want to get too deep into politics or anything. I don't think this is, but your philosophy on knowing how to fight while carrying, I think that is absolutely fantastic, dude, because unfortunately I own guns. I am for gun ownership. I wish more people that had them knew how to fight a little bit and weren't as quick to pull them when they're not necessary.
Yeah. Like one thing, like this is just a self-defense tip for all of you people out there. One thing I always tell people is like this, like for one, it's the last result. For another thing too, I always tell people like I do market like some self-defense training like for like my local clients because I have some experience, right? But then what I tell people is like when I like teach them the class, like after they buy it, I was like, all right, first and foremost, thank you for supporting and purchasing the product. But let me explain this. Self-defense is not a martial art. There's no such thing as street fighting. I'm not going to teach you how to poke me in the eye more effectively, and I'm not going to teach you to kick me in the dick. like you either know how to fight or you don't. Like you can add that stuff on top of it, but you either know how to fight or you don't. Because like and like a lot of people like who do carry, like when that's their default thing, which is like I would just this, like just jutsu, like oh man, like it scares me that kind of like thought process. Because then it's kind of like if I feel like I'm within my right, like let's say for example you push me, you punch me, whatever, and I just like slap you, right? And then you feel like, oh God, he put his hands on me. Let's go to condition red, like DEFCON 1, like let's go nuclear option. Like I would actually be a little scared about that.
It's unfortunate, and I unfortunately know a lot of people who are, I wish the motherfucker would. Like,
Oh, dude, those guys.
why
Like,
do you walk around wanting to do it? Like,
mhm,
last resort. You nailed it. Last resort. Last resort.
mhm. And like I always and like people like running away is such a great option too, you know, because like here's
Yeah, run away.
because like one thing people like also like fail to consider like with those like, you know, I wish someone would, is just like, dude, I hope you can afford a lawyer. And
Yep.
like I hope it's a good one too, because like if you have that kind of intention going into that situation, like, ooh, that's going against you. But
Yeah.
yeah, but anyway, who are some other like icons or like role models like outside of lifting? Like for myself, I am a like more recently I'm a huge fan of Darren Waller. He's a tight end on the Raiders. Like I know that's more recent, but I kind of like his story. Like that, like there's a lot of influences like for the message of my branding, like start where you stand. Darren Waller is one of them, Jordan Peterson, and then all like those kinds of guys. And then when it comes to like lifting, Bolo Young from like Bloodsport and the
Yeah.
Dragon. Because
Yeah.
like I am not your typically sized Asian. Like I'm more than 5'2", and I carry and I'm like heavier than 200 pounds. So I'm pretty rare. Um, so like when I saw a dude that big, and I was just like, but his eyes are still slanted. There's something going on here. Like, I was like, it's like they either found a white man and put him in some spray paint, or he's just that big. And like I was like, oh man, like when I saw that, I was like, I need to get like that size. I need to get that chest. But who are some others for you?
You know, this kind of speaks to, you know, I told you I did a lot of bad shit when I was younger. Dennis Rodman was an athlete that I very much looked up to. Of course, you know, we're both named Dennis. And not only was he wild as shit, you know, and I thought that was great. And Madonna and Carmen Electra and the NWO. And in addition to that, like he was a dog on the basketball court. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't a scorer. He didn't have elite handles or nothing like that. But he would defend the other team's best player every time. He was the best defender. Which, you know, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen were both great defenders in their own right. But him taking on the lead in defense, guarding the other person's best player, allowed them to save energy for offense. And then him being the best rebounder ever at 6'6", you know, he was boxing people out. I think he did the most with the least talent. And that's something I looked up to. And then him being wild as fuck in addition to that, you know, Phil Jackson not being able to find him the day before NBA Finals game, and then seeing him on Monday Nitro, but then he shows up to the game the next day and absolutely crushes it. You know, legendary. So I always liked that he could be extremely wild, but he was in great shape, worked, and did all the dirty shit without getting glory for the sake of the team. So he was always one for me. Gosh, you know, the Arnold and Sylvester when I was little, of course. Who else? You know, Bo Jackson. The whole Bo Knows campaign was big when I was young. And then I'll throw this one out of left field, man. Trick Daddy. You know, I grew up in Florida. I think I was 11 years old when www.thug.com dropped. And I would listen to that CD on repeat. And, you know, 12 years old talking about marijuana got me coping with my problems. Hennessy got me hoping I can solve them. You know, 12-year-old white kid, you know, just singing that at the top of my lungs. But you know, there's been I've always been into sports my whole life. So you know, Greg Maddux, Oral Hershiser. I pitched when I was in Little League, so I looked up to them a lot. Just a smorgasbord of, you know, eclectic athletes, musicians, actors, a ton of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really dope. So how are we doing on time?
Akibono. I can't forget Akibono. Goddamn, I can't believe I forgot that. Being an American and going over, and, you know, sumo is highly exalted in Japan, and for him to go over there and be the Grand Master, you know, absolutely great. And I love sumo wrestling, just the thought of giga bulking and throwing around other big dudes. And have you ever researched any into their lifestyle at all?
A little bit. Like they're surprisingly healthy. Like their
Yes.
diet is like they bulked up on that, like on like some really healthy foods. So like they're incredible athletes.
And they fast. They do intermittent fasting. Basically,
Mhm.
they don't call it intermittent fasting, but they, when they get up in the morning, they train before they eat or anything. And then after training, and they've got a hierarchy, and the lower you are on the hierarchy, you have to do all the bitch work for the
Yeah.
big dudes. You have to
Mhm.
clean, you have to cook, and then after training, they make a big old pot of chankonabe, and eat a fuck ton of it with rice, drink beer, take a nap, then train again and eat again, and that's what they do every day. Like, talk about
Mhm.
living the life.
Honestly, yeah, like just being able to wake up, train, eat, sleep, train again,
Absolutely.
so that's so amazing. That would be awesome. Another guy that I really like too, like I don't know if you followed like how much MMA you follow, but like Kazushi Sakuraba, like
Dude,
I
the
love
Gracie
that guy.
Killer.
Dude,
Yes.
he's sick. Like,
Yes.
and like I really liked when like the Gracies would be like lying on the back pulling guard and he's just kicking them. I was just like,
Yes.
that's what I would do. I'm not trying to go down there.
Man, I love the old Pride fights, and
Mhm.
Sakuraba was definitely one of my favorites. And him just putting it to the Gracies time after time again
Mhm.
was fantastic, because UFC 1 happened and jiu-jitsu exploded, which was great because
Mhm.
people needed to know that we grew up, or I grew up in the kung fu karate movies,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it looks great on camera,
Mhm.
and it's shown to be useful if you know how to grapple.
Yeah.
If you
Mhm.
don't know how to grapple and all you know is kung fu and karate, yeah, sorry about your luck, bro. You're getting taken down and you're getting choked or your arm snapped or whatever.
Mhm.
But seeing this exalted family, and I've looked back into in Brazil, and Gracie Jiu Jitsu versus the Vale Tudo stuff, and
Mhm.
how they were kind of rich snobs about it and everything, and
Mhm.
seeing them taken down a peg by somebody who doesn't even have a belt in any formal martial arts was
Yeah.
fucking fantastic.
Yeah, like he didn't have a belt. Like he just like learned like catch wrestling from like. So I think he was like, I don't know if he actually trained with him or was it like the books he wrote. Like, but like he just learned catch wrestling from him and then like just demolished them. And like the thing is like what's crazy about him too is like he was lighter than them. Like
Yeah.
in a weight class sport, he was messing them up. And like I know how you feel about weight classes, but like the fact that he was able to do that was still pretty insane.
Yeah, no, and that's what's great to me is he,
Mm.
fuck the weight classes, and
Mhm.
that's something I loved about Pride too, when they would have like open weight tournaments,
Yeah,
or when
yeah.
they would have like these circus fights and would have Zulu Zinho against Fedor, and I
Mhm.
think Akebono even fought in Pride. Did he fight Hoist Gracie? I think he
Uh
did. I think Hoist Gracie got him in an armbar.
I'll have to
Um,
look into that because like it's been a while, but it sounds like familiar. Yeah.
yeah, or like Emmanuel Yarbrough. I think he fought Minowa. I can't remember his first name. But and same thing, and like Emmanuel Yarbrough was like 650 pounds, just stalking
Jeez.
this 170 pounder, and it was hilarious to watch.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember like staying late up at like 3 a.m. on the other side of YouTube and like seeing a video of that where like it was like a 130, 150 up to like 150 going against a dude literally like 3 times his size. Like
yeah, it was
that
great.
funny stuff. So you'll
Absolutely.
you'll never see that like nowadays unless it's
No,
like a
not
hole
at
in a
all.
wall place in Mexico or something.
Right.
So yeah, like have you ever done any like combat sports, anything like that? Like
I've not, man. Like I've watched a lot of it.
mhm,
I enjoy it, consuming it as a fan.
mhm,
I probably don't watch as much anymore as I used to. I don't have cable anymore, and
mhm.
I've got a lot more things going on in life.
Right, yeah.
But I used to watch like every UFC pay per view. We'd look up all the Pride fights on YouTube and all that stuff. Now that I'm close to being a retired power lifter, I think the next step is to do jujitsu. That's what all the
Yeah, that's what everyone does. Yeah.
yeah. But seriously, like my son has been begging to get into it, and
Mm,
we just sold our tanning salon to free up some more time for my wife,
okay.
and he doesn't know that he's going to Disney World for his birthday in August. But when he gets back from that, we're going to sign him up for jiu-jitsu. And one of my training partners trains there too, and I'm sure they're going to probably talk me right on into it.
Yeah, like most definitely. Like I have nothing but respect for jiu-jitsu. Like nothing but respect. I think like this thing is like when it comes to like submitting a person, choking a person out, and possibly breaking a limb, I don't think there's any art better than that. But at the same time, you're looking incredibly sus doing it.
Yeah.
Like,
it's funny that meet I was judging, my training partner that trains jiu-jitsu, he was one of my side judges, and we were joking after the dude left, and he recently competed in his first jiu-jitsu tournament, but he was like, man, I was like 5 seconds away from telling that dude I'm gonna fuck him up, and then he dropped to the ground and got in like the full guard position. Like, come at me, bro.
Yeah, I love like those memes where like they're like scooting, like they're scooting their butt toward you, like, come here, man, come here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's super funny. Like, obviously, like the thing is though, like what's like scary about jiu-jitsu guys is like if you teach like a good to a great boxer how to like sprawl and wrestle a little bit, like he'll mess you up pretty well. But a jiu-jitsu guy who like has bare basic bone striking and like knows how to like take you down and whatnot, you're not doing anything against them, quite honestly.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
because like when I got into like more MMA stuff, like my background is in a lot of like more like kickboxing and boxing. Like I don't kick nearly as much now because I have like a shit ton of leg injuries and like I care about my deadlift, so it's not in my best interest. But when it comes to grappling, like, oh man, that was like so humbling to me because like literally like I needed to be at least 100 pounds, like 100 to like 150 pounds heavier than the other person to just be able to overcome their skill. Like
right.
there's no such thing as a martial art that's better for smaller people. Like I don't like that myth at all. Like if you're a bigger, stronger guy and you have two and equal skill sets, the guy who's bigger is gonna win.
Absolutely,
But at the same time, like I didn't have that skill set, so I was like, damn,
right.
like that gap for me to just like brute force my way through, like them choking me out, is 100 to 150 pounds. Like, man, like I was like, I gotta learn how to do this better.
That's my boy was telling me. See, he wrestled in college. He's a white belt in jiu-jitsu now, and his first tournament, he just basically slammed everybody into side control and took an arm. He four in a row. That's what he did, and won the white belts. But anyway, at where he trains, there's a brown belt there, and he's like 180 pounds. And now my buddy there, he's 220. He's totaled 1780 in powerlifting. He competes in strongman. He's strong as fuck, college wrestler, and he can't pass that brown belt's guard. He said that brown belt does whatever he wants with him.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I never, like, how like people say like you got all that strength for nothing. That was the only time in my mind when because like that was like, man, I was like, let me help you move couches or something. Like I'll show you.
Yeah,
absolutely. I was mad hurt.
Right.
It was really fun. Like being I have this one friend though, like he joined jiu-jitsu for all the wrong reasons. He just wanted to be choked out by buff girls, and
wrong reasons.
I just have to say that because the girlfriend might be. But yeah, but now he's like, he actually like found a love for it, so he's actually doing really good stuff.
That's awesome.
So yeah, like I love, like the thing is, like for me, like part of the reason why I like martial arts so much is because like when it came to like sports that handle anything that requires you to like run and anything that requires you to catch or like do something like that, I sucked at it. Like I was not good at basketball. I was really bad at football. Like I was really good at getting open in football, but I also sucked at catching. So it was kind of like the purpose of getting open. It's like I'm a distraction at best. So like when it came to like any other sport, I was like pretty bad at. But then I was like, oh, punching, kicking, cool. Like it's in my blood. You know what I mean?
That's awesome though.
Yeah.
That my son. Gosh, probably 2 years ago. Karate Kid, the first movie was on Netflix, and I swear he watched it like 6 times in a 24-hour span, and then subsequently probably watch it like 50 times over the next 3 weeks. But he wants to, he just wants the gi. Like that's his whole motivation. He wants a gi, and I told my wife, I said, well, karate, whatever, he get a gi, but at least jiu-jitsu, he'll learn some practical shit, versus which he later on he wants to do karate, taekwondo, that's fine, but and I'm not extremely worried about optimizing a 7-year-old, but I would, if I'm going to be paying money like for him to learn that as a base first, versus, working in reverse.
Yeah, 100%. And I think like me personally, I think wrestling skills are just so much more important. And like it kind of like I don't regret that I started out with boxing. I love boxing so much, but I totally recognize that grappling. Like when I say wrestling, I just mean like any form of grappling.
Right.
Jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
judo, like catch wrestling, folk wrestling,
Right.
or whatever. Like all that's super good. I've met parents who like want to optimize their kids. Like I just think that's so weird, man. Like
I do too, and especially at that age, like. And my son loves coming to the gym. He asked, I never forced him to come to the gym. Of course, him and my wife have came to my meets when he was little. He's seen my training videos, and one day, Dad, can I go to the gym and train? Hell yeah, dude! And brought him up there, and it's even now like we're getting a little more structure, but it's structured play. Like I'll have him hang on the pull-up bar, and I bet you can't count to 75 while you're hanging, and 85. Ha, Dad, I got 10 more. And like little does he know that was the goal, but things like that. And I'll have him pull the sled, and I bet you can't run all the way to that gate before I can, and pretend race him and stuff. And we have fun, and he likes doing box jumps, and he'll bench press with a bamboo bar and stuff, and he enjoys it. He tries to get me to take him up there every day, and sometimes it's just not feasible. But kids, they want to emulate you. You're their first hero. Your moms and dads, you're their first heroes, and you don't have to force it on them. They're going to want to do what you're doing, and so if you present a lifestyle that you want them to have, 9 times out of 10, they're going to follow in your footsteps. My mom forced me to play baseball. I grew out of love with baseball. I enjoyed it at first. I was good at it. I liked pitching. By the time I was 10, 11 years old, I didn't want to play it anymore. I wanted to play something else. And my mom was like, "Oh, no, you're too good at it. We got to keep you in baseball." And I was over it. And my last year, Little League, I ended up hurting my shoulder, which was a blessing in disguise, in my opinion, because I didn't have to play baseball no more after that. And I would never do that personally, and I don't hold any animosity towards my mother for making me do that. It's water under the bridge, but lesson learned too. I would never force my son into a sport. If he decided I want to play this sport, I would make him commit to the whole season. I wouldn't let him quit mid-season. And he will always be active, whether he wants to or not. Spoiler alert, kids like to be active. So you really don't have to force that on them. So, yeah, that's it. As long as he's active and, with whatever, even if it's just playing outside for an hour, or, he wants to do jiu-jitsu or come to the gym with me, I don't care if he ever wants to play an organized sport or not. It's not really that big of a deal to me.
That's awesome. Yeah. Cause like, I definitely wish I had more of that kind of stuff available to me as a kid, but at the same time, it's like just doing some random stuff with your friends and like making good friends and stuff, like where you can get that kind of stuff is good too. I remember one thing though, I don't know why this brought this up, when like your mom like forced you to play baseball. My dad, he would take me out to like the driving range, like for golf, and like, just hit it as hard as you can and as far as you can. Right. And like, I didn't know this at the time. All he said was this: if you hit this ball really, really hard, I'll give you McDonald's. Because I was a fat kid, so he knew how to bribe me. Right. I didn't know he was like entering. I don't know why I didn't put it together in my head, because I was like 5 to 7ish, right? I didn't put it in my head. He entered me into some competitions, and then I'm hitting this ball as hard and as far as I can. He's winning a couple $100, and then I get like a $1 menu burger, and I'm happy. I'm the happiest kid ever. I'm just like, yeah, this is great. I love this.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So I was just like, thanks, Dad.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was really funny, but yeah, that's really good. Like, I'm really like, it makes me happy like to see that kind of stuff too, because like not to get too deep or whatever, but it's just like there's a lot of negativity out in the world, but I feel like the greatest source of positivity is just like, looking at a strong relationship between a parent and their child, like it's just like a good feeling for the future. That's the kind of feeling I get from it, which is very fulfilling for the parent, and then like, very awe-inspiring and whatever else for like everyone else. So that's beautiful, man. Like, it's awesome.
Thank you. It's been life-changing, like literally, and I don't say that metaphorically at all. Like it's been life-changing for the better.
That's awesome, man. So I think that's about everything that we got going for today. So is there anything else that you would want to kind of say, close up on, maybe like plug or anything like that before we head out?
Yeah, we didn't really get into it, but I assume there's going to be a lot of 16 to 25-year-olds watching this.
Mhm.
Google house hacking, Google Roth IRAs.
Uh,
Yeah. Look at both of those, especially the house hacking. The younger and sooner you can be driven towards that, the better your chances of retiring. In your mid 30s. These are things I didn't learn until my early to mid 30s. That if I would have known when I was 16 years old, I would be retired right now. So yeah, house hacking, Roth IRAs. Everybody Google that right now after you're done watching us.
Sounds good. Yeah, your mom was right. Save your money. Like, oh my God, like, like I've made so many mistakes. So, one more thing before we go. Like, my mistakes were mainly, like, mental, I guess you could say, because like I went into the military as a very immature, moody, angsty, um, like, basically a suicidal teenager, like for whatever reason, and then, you know, a person who doesn't believe they have a future doesn't really make smart decisions for the future. So
No, yeah.
so, there's a lot of things that can that need to be discussed, like, that we're not probably not going to touch on. But first and foremost, you matter. We love you. I love you. You're it's not worth it to just cut it off on there. Like, there's so much greater things ahead of you. And while you might not see it in that moment, just wait another day. It will come. So, but when that day does come and you kind of like wake up from it, slowly like inch yourself out of it and what else have you, start making those little decisions to make your life better. First and foremost, save your money because it will help you. And then, like, of course, like your credit, like making sure your credit is good. And everything that you mentioned as well, house hacking and everything like that. So that's a great thing to leave off on, man. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate the talk. It's been a complete honor. Like, I'm really, truly honored to be talking to you, man. So hopefully, I'm gonna try to get to that 600 bench and see where I land up.
Absolutely.
Let's see where it ends up. But yeah, thanks again. Great talk, bro.
I appreciate you having me, man. Anytime.
All right, cool, man.